Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Cowichan-Malahat-Langford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are dealing with a lot of confusion on the marijuana file because this government is refusing to have a clear conversation with Canadians. I hope sincerely that tonight we can get to the bottom of what actual action will be taken on this file without hiding behind smoke and mirrors. I want to just bring up a few facts that add to the present confusion. The Parliamentary Secretary has previously stated that the only control in place is the current criminal sanction for the production and trafficking of marijuana. He did not mention possession, although he probably did wish that he had. The Minister of Health has spoken to the United Nations and did not once say that Canada will legalize marijuana, but I suppose that it was strongly intimated. When the Parliamentary Secretary was asked in this House last week about the Prime Minister saying that he would legalize marijuana, there was a quick shift in his answer. He spoke about replacing the current existing criminal sanction with a more effective regulatory regime. The criminal sanction is presumably not seen as effective. Mr. Speaker, I had the great opportunity to speak with police members from Vancouver, Saanich, and Victoria during the recent Canadian Police Association reception, and they too are very confused over the government's plan. Police are justifiably uncertain on whether to enforce against small marijuana infractions, knowing that the laws are set to change. The confusion continues with local governments in British Columbia, some of whom have issued business licenses for marijuana dispensaries. The Minister of Health has stated that the government will work with law enforcement partners to encourage appropriate and proportionate criminal justice measures. In light of the plan to legalize, what exactly are appropriate and proportionate response to stopping a young person in possession of marijuana and having them live with a criminal record for the rest of their lives? Marijuana possession of 30 grams or less can result in up to a $1,000 fine and/or 6 months in jail. Even if the maximum penalty is not imposed, that person still has the record, and it can have profound consequences for the rest of his or her life. Both the Liberals and the NDP realize, to quote the Minister of Health again, that it is, quote, impossible to arrest our way out of this problem. This is a fact, and yet Canada today continues under existing punitive marijuana laws that harm Canadians from coast to coast to coast. The status quo is morally unacceptable and does nothing to effectively confront the problem. What we need, Mr. Speaker, is the federal government to take some leadership on this issue, decriminalize the possession of small amounts of marijuana while we wait for it to eventually bring forward legislation for legalization. The Prime Minister has previously stated that there have been many situations over history when laws that have been overturned by previous convictions. There will be a process for that which we will set up in a responsible way. However, the Parliamentary Secretary has since stated that they are not looking at a system of pardons or amnesty. These comments conflict with what the Prime Minister has said and give rise to questions on who is actually speaking for the government. With this as context, I want to ask the Parliamentary Secretary some clear questions. Will the government decriminalize possession of small amounts of marijuana immediately as we wait for legalization next year? If yes, when can we expect it to happen? And if the answer is no, will the government be pardoning those who get criminal records for possession? Thank you.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for the opportunity to provide some clarification that he clearly requires with respect to this file. I'd like to speak at some length to this, but I want to be very clear on his questions. He asked me very specifically if the Government of Canada will decriminalize marijuana immediately. No. The answer is no, Mr. Speaker. He also has asked if there is, at the present time, any contemplation of pardons or amnesty, and the answer, and I want to be very clear for him so that he's not further confused on this, the answer is no. Now, with respect to the suggestion of decriminalization, this has been a matter of some discussion over a number of years, and I would simply point out to the member opposite that in 2012, the leader of his party, the honourable member from Outremont, was asked very directly in a televised interview, would you decriminalize marijuana? And I think, Mr. Speaker, that his reply is very helpful and may assist the member in understanding some of the issues associated to his recommendation. In response to the question, would you decriminalize marijuana, the member from Outremont stated, no, I think that would be a mistake. He then went on to say that before ever contemplating any changes to the current control regime of marijuana, the criminal sanction, we needed to get the best medical experts, the best legal experts, and the best law enforcement experts around the table to see what's realistic. Mr. Speaker, that's precisely what this government is doing. But the member from Outremont went on to say, but to decide in advance that it should simply be open, I think it would be a serious mistake. Mr. Speaker, I agree with the comments of the member from Outremont in 2012. It would be a serious mistake. Decriminalization would only achieve one thing. It would make it easier for the police to enforce the existing sanctions against the possession of marijuana. It would do nothing to protect our children. It would do nothing to keep marijuana out of the hands of our kids, and this is a serious health and safety problem in our communities. It would do nothing to remove the profits of organized criminal activity associated to the marijuana trade from organized crime. It would do nothing to keep our communities safer. And what it would do is it would make it extremely difficult the implementation of an effective regulatory regime that would enable us to control the production, the distribution, and the consumption of marijuana. Mr. Speaker, our government is absolutely committed to working with the scientific community to base our regulations on the best evidence, the best science, and the best advice of experts. I will tell you, Mr. Speaker, that currently what the police are dealing with, and I will tell you that my knowledge of what the police are dealing with in this country with respect to these laws is based on more than simply a conversation at a reception. For over 40 years, I was a police officer. For 10 years, I was the chief of the Toronto Police Service. And I can tell you that police officers across this country know their responsibilities and know the law. They know their responsibilities to keep their communities safe. They have the discretion to exercise their authorities according to what is in the best public interest and the interest of keeping their communities safe. And I, for one, have confidence in their ability to do the job we've asked them to do.
The honourable member for Cowichan-Malahat-Langford.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am very disappointed to hear that kind of a response from a supposedly progressive government. The fact of the matter is in my province of British Columbia alone, marijuana is worth $6 billion a year. The current laws are not effective. All of that money is going to criminal organizations, and the people who are getting their lives ruined, who are getting the records, are people who are innocent. They get caught with small possessions, and they have to face that sentence, that charge that profoundly impacts the rest of their life. If I understand the Parliamentary Secretary correctly, that means that we have more than a year of waiting while we continue with needless arrests and wasteful trials. The Justice Department has confirmed it's going to cost taxpayers as much as $4 million a year. It is not what a progressive government should be doing with marijuana laws. At least the Liberal Member of Parliament from Beaches, East York, yesterday had the courage to come out and publicly say that prosecution for marijuana possession is patently unfair in light of the government's future plans in this matter. So I was wondering if the Parliamentary Secretary could take direction from that member.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada.
Thank you again, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, our government takes its responsibility for the safety and the health of all Canadians very seriously. We are not introducing legislation to legalize and regulate marijuana to improve the profits of any enterprise. We are doing it to fulfill our responsibilities to keep communities safe. I would urge all Canadians to respect and uphold the laws of Canada as they exist, and we will work diligently to the development of an effective regulatory framework that will help us achieve our public purpose aims. And we are looking forward for the opportunity to work with provinces and territories, with Canadians coast to coast, to find the best way to do that.
La motion portant que la Chambre s'ajoute.
The motion